Greetings, everyone. I'm Mar. Once again, this is my opinion. As you can tell from the title, it is once again time to tackle AEW, All Elite Wrestling, and the subject, of course, is their latest pay-per-view, All Out. Now, it has been a while since I've talked about AEW on the channel, because I didn't get around to reviewing their last pay-per-view, mainly because I just wasn't in the mood to sit down and record something after I watched that pay-per-view, which I did watch live. Because if I remember right, I believe I'd just come back to work at that time, was working day shift, and could watch it live, but just didn't feel up to it, or it could have been right before I went back and was still furloughed. But either way, I just didn't feel like it, and I haven't gone back to watch it since to re-review it, so one day down the road I'll probably sit down, rewatch it, and give it a retroactive review, give my thoughts on the matches and how the finishes have since played into the grander scheme of AEW Dynamite storylines. Now, I do try to watch Dynamite every week. There's some weeks where I admittedly have to just skip through some of the lighter stuff and focus on the big picture stuff. And some weeks where I'm like, I already heard what happened, I'll just watch the next week's. But I do pay attention enough to know what's going on into the pay-per-view. And that is most evident with this first match, our opening contest, which is the Tooth or Nail match between Big Swole, interesting choice of name by the way, and Dr. Britt Baker, Tony Schiavone's old friend. And this is one of the few matches that is not at Daly's place. It takes place at what is supposed to be Britt Baker's actual dental practice, but I do wonder if it's her actual office. The reason I wonder that is I know when you rent out a place, you usually sign a contract, and there's probably some stipulation in there. And I don't think there's something in Britt Baker's contract that would allow for filming there. But considering that she also wrestles on the side, she probably could have snuck something in there. So for all we know, this is her actual place. Either way, even if it is a set, she probably had it set up to look close enough to what her actual office looks like to go with everything. And it works. Big Swole shows up at the office, goes in there, harasses Britt Baker's workers. I use that word because it's like they're her workers. Well, at least the one at the front is innocent. The other one, not so much, because she does interfere. Swole's looking throughout. Britt's already starting with the mind games. You see some blood in one room. I'm guessing it's supposed to be a little wink, wink, nudge, nudge to what dentists and barbers used to do back in the day. Then there's the chattering teeth. Oh, Joker would be proud. And then there's a surprise attack! Baker takes control of the match for a little bit. They end up on the dumpster where Big Swole gets DDT'd. There's a lot of back and forth going on. And this is a match that really goes with the gimmick of them fighting in and around a dental office. You see everything that you would imagine that you'd see in a dental office. Like with the drill bit part, I was imagining, is it safe? And of course, a shot of Novocaine comes into play, and it comes into the finish. Britt gets it out, and she looks like she's going to get Big Swole. Big Swole reverses it and puts the needle right into Dr. Baker's leg, which, if you've ever had Novocaine, it really makes you feel numb. Like the last time I had some major dental work, they did the Novocaine, I feel numb. And then I can imagine when you get your legs, like you got a dead leg. You can still move, but you have no feeling, so it just feels weird. I kind of also feel from experience when I cut my finger and cut the nerve, it felt weird. Like even now, I don't have full feeling, but I still have more feeling than I did originally, and it's been about 3 years. But at first, it just feels weird. Well, anyway, Swole takes it to Baker after this, uses the laughing gas, and the ref calls. This is one of those weird ones where it's like, really, the ref's going to call now instead of going for a pin, but she's out, ref's discretion. Just from the title of the match and the people involved, how this match plays out is what you would expect from a gimmick that is this silly. If you're not a fan of some of the sillier gimmick matches, you probably didn't like this one. But I think for an opening contest, it fit. Got the audience into the feeling for the pay-per-view. It's not like one of those high-flying ones inside the ring that'll set the stage and the tone for the event. It gets things off on the right foot and gets you like, yeah, let's watch them wrestling. And the next match was a tag team match of the Young Bucks versus Jurassic Express. And by the way, I do have 3 pages of notes with me, so if you see me look down, just look at something real quick, that's what I'm looking at, and I'm not looking at something else, as I've had to probably mention a couple times in all these videos. This match starts off slow. There's some train wrestling. The Bucks are very aggressive throughout the entire match, as we've seen them be more aggressive lately. They're not full-blown heels yet, but they're not traditional baby faces. I wouldn't classify them as tweeners yet, but they're starting to go in that direction. And it's hard to tell if it's going to be a full-blown heel turn in the traditional sense, or if it's just for who they're wrestling. They're being more aggressive. If you're going against Luchasaurus, that big guy, you're going to have to be a little bit more aggressive. But of course, it got some boos at points from the audience. So it is something that has to be addressed. At one point, Matt Jackson does his multiple belly-to-belly suplex spot, as we saw him do in the main event of the last pay-per-view, where he did it through the entire football field, all the way to the goal line. Here he doesn't do that something as elaborate, but at the last moment he attempts to do the last one over the top rope. Of course, Jungle Boy reverses out of that because he's like, hell no, I ain't taking that spot. And around this point, JR says something on commentary that I noted and I got a light chuckle out of, and that's where he noted that the Young Bucks are not wrestling brothers. Nice little wink wink to some of the wrestlers who have been brothers in kayfabe. Like, remember at one point Edge and Christian were kayfabe brothers, now they're just long-term best friends. Continuity, what is that? Jurassic Express hints the Extinction event, but the pin is interrupted. And for that, I would rather it be an interrupted pin or a rope break rather than a kick out, because if there's one thing that is a pet peeve of mine, and I'm not the only one with this pet peeve, it looks like, in the wrestling fandom, is that there's way too many kick out of finishers. When done correctly, it works. Like if you're trying to build up a new guy, show that he is very strong, very resilient, or you're trying to get over the drama of a match, like, what does this guy have to do to put this guy away? But if you just go out there and prostitute finishers, they don't mean anything. So when it's a pin interrupted or a rope break, whether it's the finisher or a big move that you're like, oh, that guy, we should have put him away, makes a little bit more sense. And this is one of those ones where an interrupted pin made a little bit more sense. And near the end of the match, Luchasaurus had one of the best looking moves of the entire match, and that's where he did a top rope springboard dive to the outside. He got some good air. He went over the barricade, hit one of the Young Bucks and a couple of the wrestlers who were in the audience. This is a spot with the way he did it. If it was just a normal audience out there, they would have had to put planted fans there, or probably look like, do you mind if Luchasaurus hits you? Which I doubt they do that, so they'd probably just go full plant. It was me, be like, yeah, Luchasaurus he can clothesline me. I don't care. He can clothesline me. Then I get a shirt that says, I went to All Out and got clotheslined by Luchasaurus, and all I got was a stupid t-shirt. Of course, Luchasaurus is out for a majority of the match at that point. Jungle Boy kicks out of the super kick party, as you would expect, but then he's V-triggered and pinned, and the Bucks win. I like how I put that in my note. He's V-triggered. There should be a meme of that, V-triggered. All in all, it was a pretty fun match. If you did not have the previous match, this would actually have made for a good traditional opener where you get the fans really into it, but it's good for a second match and for a first match in the ring proper. This makes me wonder where the Young Bucks storylines are going to go after this, especially with what we see happen later on with Kenny and Paige during their title defense. Next, we get the Casino Battle Royal, where 21 men duke it out for a world title shot. This is a match we were supposed to get a couple pay-per-views ago, but because of COVID being in the full swing during that time, they had to change it to a ladder match. But now, with things going up and down, and AEW actually taking a lot of the good precautions, despite what one of their employees was doing in Sturgis, we're going to be able to do this. Now, I did only take a few notes here to mention some spots, but it was a pretty decent Casino Battle Royal. But with how the rules are, it came across as Royal Rumble Light. And here's what I mean by that. Wrestlers entered in suits of 5. Suits are their groups. So instead of 1 at a time, like with the Royal Rumble, it's 5 at a time. Every 3 minutes, another suit entered. And then once you got to 20, the Joker would enter last. So getting the Joker just like getting the number 30 in the Royal Rumble. Now it's tied all around the 21 gimmick, so it feels a little different. But since people are coming out in larger groups, there's a little bit more of a danger of like, oh, who's going to be? Oh, my ally. Oh, crap, that guy hates me. Instead of having to wait every 90 seconds. And Taz was on commentary for this, so we had a 4-man booth for a bit, so that added a little bit of freshness to the match. The first 4 were Jake Hager, Christopher Daniels, Blade, and Trent. And they started things out pretty good. More wrestlers came out. Darby Allin entered the match. Starks entered the match. And Darby was the one who eventually eliminated Starks. But Starks got a little bit of revenge at that point because he dragged Darby out and threw him into the post. And then they called him Cage. Put Darby in a body bag filled with tacks. Which just watching him pour the tacks in, I'm like, oh, I know where this is going. And then once he got thrown in there, I'm like, oh, no, this is not going to end well. Then he threw Darby over the top rope on the other side. I'm like, ew. I hate to imagine what Darby looks like when they pull him out. I wonder if we're going to see some footage of what he looked like on Dynamite. Because usually when he suffers an injury like that or is eliminated in such a way, they usually will show it in Darby's next video package. Once everyone is in there, including Archer, Cage and Archer, get into a fist fight. So nice to see the 2 big heavies going at it. It's like kaiju fight. I mean, us kaiju fans have to wait till next year to get our fix because King Kong vs. Godzilla, the remake, got postponed, so this is the closest thing we're going to get to a kaiju fight. And at one point, Archer goes for a chokeslam, and Cage reverses it out of it in a weird way. I've never seen someone Cage's size do something like this before. It's like a weird flip. When he did it, I'm like, whoa. This is one of those moments that if this pay-per-view was in front of an actual full audience, they would have gone wild just watching the spot. I'm like, oh, that's good. You don't really see people of that size do that. Cage is very athletic, which, of course, I mean, he's a big guy, but you wouldn't imagine someone who's built like him pulling off something like that. I mean, when we see Luchasaurus do some of the stuff he does, it's amazing, especially with how they build him up as being flexible. But seeing Cage doing that when I don't think they've ever built him up as being able to do stuff like that on commentary even, so it really was an amazing looking spot. Didn't help him win in the end because Cage did get eliminated. Then the final 4 were The Butcher, Archer, Seidel, and Kingston. And after some back and forth shenanigans, Archer won with an assistance from Jake the Snake Roberts and his snake in the bag. We never see the snake, but we know it's in there. I have a feeling eventually Jake is probably going to have a stipulation where he cannot bring the bag down to ringside. Just you watch, it's going to be there. And of course, remember, you never trust the snake. So now Archer has a future opportunity at the AEW World title. And of course, him and Jake are in the audience at the end during the main event watching Mox and MJF go at it. And I bet you they're probably thinking, who would be the better opponent? The next match is a little controversial considering one of the spots during it. And as an aside, I did not watch the original airing of the pay-per-view. I had to wait for the replay on Monday because of a few things I heard wrong. So I tried to keep away from a lot of the wrestling groups and a lot of the wrestling Twitter just to make sure I didn't get too many spoilers. But this is one of the few things I could not avoid due to a couple of friends on my feed bringing it up and sharing stuff. And that is the fall Matt Hardy takes during this match with Sammy Guevara. The Broken Rules match. Okay, in retrospect, probably not the best gimmick to use considering what happens. But for how little this match went lengthwise, it worked. But without that bump, this match probably could have been so much more. Has a great hype package, Cradle to the Grave playing over, showing everything that's happened between the two on TV. Delete, Matt chasing Sammy with the cart during the stadium match. Matt getting hit in the head with the chair, inadvertently getting busted open, all the back and forth between them, challenging to the match. So the hype package is good. Then, of course, once they get into the match, Sammy goes tit for tat and chases Matt with a vehicle, bigger one, not really a golf cart. As a Hall of Famer would say, turnabout's fair play. He doesn't try to run him over with him, he just chases him. Eventually they get to a lift. They go up, they're fighting up there. Matt looks like he's going to do a side effect off it. Sammy reverses it, and he does like a little charging, half spear tackle off the lift into the tables below. And this is where that aforementioned spot happens. Sammy lands alright. Most of Matt's body hits the table, but the top part of his body goes down, and his head hits the cement. Now, since this spot, Matt has come out and said he did not suffer a concussion. which I don't know if I fully believe that. If he did not suffer a concussion, he is one lucky SOB. But watching how he was after this, I am very surprised if that is the case and he did not suffer a concussion, because he was out of it for a while. I mean, they had to do the X thing. They brought the actual doctor out to examine Matt. They were going to see if he could continue, how he was. And as someone who has suffered a head injury before, to where I've had no memory from before the incident until I woke up in the hospital, other than some brief flashes. I'm not going to go into the full story here. I'm going to save that for a episode of Streakathon. But it's scary when you're like that, and then makes me wonder just how lucid was Matt during everything that followed. Was he running on fumes? Was he like staggering a little bit and just trying to finish the match from memory? Was he actually all there? Because if he wasn't all there, that makes the rest of this match a little bit scarier, because anything could have happened. It's not like Undertaker in his match with Brock, where he's in a area where he's very familiar with, where even if he's running more on muscle memory, he's at least in an area where he's done enough stuff enough times where he can do things relatively safely. But with what happens after this, there's no way Matt could have done this relatively safely if he was just running on muscle memory. And the reason I say that is I got out of the van under my own power, and I don't remember that. And just the thought of that, when you take being in a situation like that where you have no conscious memory, and putting into a situation like this where you're following a coworker up a scaffold to do a planned spot, but then you could end up falling inadvertently. That's what makes that scary. And I have to agree with a lot of other people. This is probably where they should have actually called the match off. And I actually thought, like, oh, that would be a anticlimactic but reasonable end of the match. Have Sammy win by decision, and then continue this properly at another time. But no, that didn't happen. Instead, Matt came back out, chased after Sammy, chased him into the fans. They started brawling. They ended up brawling to the scaffold. They went up. Then Matt did a thing where he pushed Sammy off the scaffold down to the stage below. The ref did a 10 count, and there was a win, which was made for a relatively short match. But this last part feels like they called an audible. Like that maybe that would have been a spot later on in the match. They would have been a lot more brawling in the back to lead to there. But they decided to call the audible, which makes sense. I mean, they could have done the whole Mankind Undertaker thing where they actually had the whole match before entering it. But considering what we've learned about concussions since then, it makes sense. Like, if they're at least going to continue the match to get the proper finish, they would jump right ahead and skip probably a whole bunch of other stuff. Even though, personally, I feel they should have just called the audible and ended the match right there. And then you actually have Matt having a reason to go back after Sammy. Like, you gave me a concussion. You won. But here's the thing. Matt Hardy does not die. I might be broken, but I will not be broken. Something like that. But he's going to be doing a promo on Dynamite, so who knows what will happen. Following the match that should have been called off is the AEW Women's Title match. Shida versus Thunder Rosa. The AEW Women's Champion versus NWA Women's Champion, which that fact does play a part in the hype package for this. Having Billy Corgan narrate part of it, showing a lot of footage back and forth from both NWA and AEW. It's nice. Makes me wonder how many more NWA wrestlers we're going to see pop in, mainly because of NWA being in that little bit of limbo right now. We see a lot of more interpromotional matches. It'd be nice, even if it's only a brief working relationship. Heck, even if they continue to work together after NWA comes back, if they do, that'd be nice. Even if it's only for like big events. The match was back and forth as it progressed, and from how they were going at each other, I saw that one thing they brought up on commentary was very apt, and that was that it was, from a martial arts standpoint, it was grappling versus strikes, where Shida, being from the more Japanese school of wrestling, was more about strikes, whereas Santo Rosa was more about grappling. Nice little mix of styles there, and they meshed well. Because it's that whole thing, grappling, if I want to hook you, you hook. But with strikes, is like you have to be able to withstand the damage in order to hook me. And that kind of played into the match as it went along. At one point, Shida went to go do her chair spot where she puts the chair up and then runs and does the jump and dive. But Thunder Rosa turned the tables and used the spot against her. Pulled one herself. And it was around this point JR mentioned something on commentary that I had to jot down as well, which is how he described how the older women's matches were executed. This was way back earlier in his wrestling career when he used to be a ref, and he said they were formulaic, which is an apt description because you could even say some of them were like that even into the 80s and probably parts of the 90s, especially during the Attitude Era when it was more about TNA and not the in-ring work. Later on in the match, Thunder Rosa hit a Death Valley driver on the apron, which that spot is like, eee. That's probably going to be a spot Jim Cornette's going to complain about in his podcast, which he's welcome to, but a spot like that, I don't mind. It looked like it was done safely, and it was near the end of the match. It got a 2 count, but this is one of those times where a move like the Death Valley driver not being the finish and being kicked out of makes sense. Even if it was on the apron, it's not like she immediately went for the pin and then kick out. She had to roll her in, there was a slight delay, and then she kicked out. So it's that traditional thing of if you hit a finish but don't go for the pin right away, person's going to kick out. Even though I hate the Death Valley driver basically just being a high spot like that. For me, it should be a finish or be important. But here it was semi-important. And this was followed up with a basic wrist lock. Now, from my security training, we actually had to learn how to do like a wrist lock thing. And that's when I realized that it's kind of funny that the wrist lock and the bar that associated with it, it's considered such a basic wrestling move in professional wrestling that people are like, yeah. But if you actually put someone in it or have yourself put in it, you'll see it actually hurts. You can actually get someone to tap out legitimately to it, especially if you do it right and at the right angle. So for them to go right from the Death Valley driver pin right into a wrist lock, I thought was smart and a very apt move, especially if you are someone who does more of a grappling-based style. So I have to applaud Thunder Rosa for that. Shida eventually got out of it, and she did a Falcon Arrow as the match went along for a 2 count. And I had to rewind just to see if this was apt on the commentary, but they mentioned it's because she didn't hook the legs properly, which a nice little way to build it up is like, hey, if you're not going to hook the legs properly, then it makes sense someone would kick out. They got the stretch muffler in, but it was a rope break. And Shida eventually got the win and retained her women's title following a knee strike and a pin, which is kind of a little weird, but that's the biggest move she actually hits in the whole match, so it makes sense. And it goes with her whole striking persona. And I don't know if you've been hit by a kneecap before. I have. You hit someone hard enough in the face with a kneecap, it'll knock them out. Me, it just caused a bloody nose because it was an accident. But if you're actually running and jumping to intentionally hit someone with a knee, you could, I'd say, at least knock them loofy enough for a 3 count. So, as a finish, the high knee makes sense. Especially, I know I don't mean this to be sexist, but I'd say more so in the women's division. The male division, yeah, it could work. But then again, people complain about the Judas effect being one of Chris Jericho's finishes. But I believe it, like, for that reason. And plus, it's a spinning elbow. You could potentially kill someone with a spinning elbow if you hit them right in the nose or in the eye in the right area. On the whole, this was a pretty good women's match. And sadly, I really haven't paid much attention to most of the women's matches the last couple months. But I'm going to pay a little bit more attention to them now. Because after watching this match, I can definitely say their women's division is building up slowly. I mean, it had that little rough start. And I don't just mean because of people making fun of Riho's size. But, you know, it's more building the division from scratch. But now, they're starting to get there. Following this match was one of the few matches that, from a story standpoint, I had some interest in. But the fact that they had to build it in a way like this is like, yeah. And that, of course, is the Dark Order versus the Natural Nightmares, Matt Cardona, and Scorpio Sky. The reason I say this is I do not see why this had to be a multi-man tag match. It screams of trying to get everyone on the card. I know Matt Cardona is their friends and I do like him. But there's no reason that he had to be in a 4-on-4 tag match. This could have simply been either just a normal tag match where you had maybe one of the scrubs from the Dark Order teaming with Colt Cabana against the Natural Nightmares or Matt Cardona in the corner. And you have Brody Lee in the Dark Order corner, and you could have gotten the same type of story. But nope, it's a 4-on-4. The Dark Order does take control early, which makes sense because they're the heels. Cardona turns the tide after he gets a tag in. He's looking jacked. He's in good shape. You can see being away from that WWE system and Vince McMahon's influence has done wonders for his health. In-ring work for the whole match is decent. Back and forth is good. Another little thing on commentary that tickled me during this was we got a DC Comics reference. It was a Dick Grayson, Jason Todd, Damian Wayne reference. Where it started off where it's a flub line and then Shivani jumped right on it. This is why I love Shivani at times because he'll jump on these things like that. And he's like, I don't think you're Jason. Don't call me Jason Todd. And then Excalibur went Damian Wayne. That's the exact word, not the exact wording, but it made me pop as a semi-comic fan and Batman fan. I'm like, oh, I like that. You're doing some good work there, Shivani. From one person with the middle name Anthony to another. Of course, in the end, Team Nightmare gets the win after Rhodes pins Colt Cabana with a roll-up after Cabana goes for one move too many. So Dustin, being the wily veteran, going for the pin attempt at the right moment. And what makes this finish is the expression on Brody Lee's face after the pin. He's like looking like, you idiot, you really did it. I mean, it's all just one expression, but you can see just in that expression all the emotions and thoughts that are going through Brody Lee's face. And of course, afterwards, he goes up to Cabana and he does berate him. He doesn't smack him, but he's berating him. And then the Dark Order leaves. And then in the back, Dustin cuts a promo, and we find out that, per Tony Khan, Dustin now has a TNT title match against Brody Lee, which is another thing. You could have gotten to this story with just a normal tag match. Have them face his scrubs, and then since he beat the scrubs, now he gets to go against Brody Lee. You could have also done Brody Lee versus Dustin in this place here, but I think you probably should build to that, not go do it automatically, so having it done in a tag match makes sense. And Dustin does a pretty decent promo after this, and I like one of the things he says near the end of it in regards to Brody Lee, that he is coming for your blood, and hell is coming with me. I like that. It kind of fits the whole persona Dustin's going with now, especially with the makeup and the suit. Even though he's doing a more blue color scheme now and less of the red that he started with, still looks pretty cool, the design. And I love the mild intensity that Dustin had during this promo. And now we come to the three main matches of the event. Starting, of course, with the tag team title match. We have FTR challenging Omega and Page for the titles. In the promo building up the differences in wrestling philosophies and the tension in the Elite, did a pretty good job in selling this match. This is one of the storylines I actually have been following intensely since the very beginning, so this promo just basically was a refresher course for me, and I liked how it was built up and edited. And of course, the tag ropes are employed during this match due to FTR's contract. I do like that they built that up, and it goes with FTR's whole old school wrestling approach. And of course, there's dissension between the tag champs due to things that have been happening in recent weeks involving Page turning his back on the Bucks kicking him out of the Elite. And the match is hard-hitting, which also fits the little clash of wrestling styles there, and they fit together pretty well, I thought. At one point, Kenny hits a Tiger Driver 98, but he got a 2 count out of it on Wheeler. Then a little bit after this, Hardwood has Omega in a Vine ankle lock. He got a rope break, but after this, Omega was slowing a little bit, and he was selling the leg injury, which does play into the finish later on, so nice little bit of selling on Omega there. I know even though some people would say he can't really sell or he overdoes stuff, but nice little subtle selling on his part on this. Page twist slams Wheeler from the top rope for a near fall, which just the way he did that movement, I'm like, oh, that's a cool looking move. I don't know what else to call it other than a twist slam, because even the announcers don't really give it a name. And usually Tony or JR are usually good at bringing up the names like that, so it's like, I guess it doesn't have a name. A little bit after this, Omega goes for a V-trigger. Wheeler pulls away and he hits Page. Which the whole match I was wondering, like, with the dissension that's been going on, there's got to be a spot where one of them hits the other one. I mean, it's how to break up a tag team 101. But with everything going on, it would make sense here to go a little cliche. And of course they do, and it's the inadvertent route, so I was wondering, like, okay, is that going to play into the finish and one turns on the other, or will it come into play after the match? It's the latter. It comes into play after the match, so there's not going to be any swerve, bro. And then after this, FTR spike pile drives for a near fall, which, like I said, I hate it when they have to do that, but since this is a match later on the card, it made sense to kick out of the spike pile driver, even though I think a pile driver is one of the few moves that should rarely, if ever, be kicked out of. Mainly because it's a move, if done wrong, you can legitimately injure yourself. Insert Stone Cold Steve Austin gif here. Even though that was a botched tombstone, but my point still stands. They do get a pin following the second spike pile driver. FTR new champs, and the 228-day reign of the first champions comes to an end. They actually mentioned that on commentary. Nice little bit of selling. The thing is, Omega was trying to get in the ring to break up the pin, but he couldn't because of that leg. After FTR leave, and it's just Omega and Paige, Omega, looks at Paige, and then he walks out. And then he leaves the arena with the Young Bucks. They're all talking like, I'm done, I'm out of here. Which I'm done can mean multiple things, mainly because Omega drives off and the Young Bucks don't get in the car with him. It could mean that Omega is going to quit the Elite entirely and walk out on his own. It could mean that he's done teaming with Paige. There's also the whole thing that maybe he's just done with AEW for a while. They might do a whole fake retire storyline, or it could be that maybe we're going to get a change in character with Kenny Omega. Could he turn heel? Who knows? We're going to have to wait and see how this plays out. But either way, it should be interesting. Some character development for Mr. Omega. Following this, we get the rubber match. Being the match before the main event is usually the death spot if it is a match the fans are not into, but since this is Orange Cassidy versus Chris Jericho in a Mimosa Mayhem match, that is not the case here. Now, I thought their first couple matches were pretty decent. Don't really remember much about the matches themselves. I remember more the build-up from the matches. Seeing Jericho get annoyed by Orange, getting that fire out of Orange, of course. Orange ruining Jericho's expensive jacket, which got orangier and orangier by the week. And then, of course, that little promo contest. Then, of course, the whole cameo with Bischoff and the whole debate. This whole build-up's been good. And the Mimosa Mayhem match as a stipulation, that is only a stipulation that Jericho in a promo and a video package could get over. It's that ridiculous. But he sold it so well that this is one of those ones you can't help but wonder how it's going to play. And, of course, once we do see the promo end and how the ring's set up, and we see that there is things on the side of the ring with pools of mimosa, you know that one or both of those pools is going to come into play before the end of the match. It's the whole Chekhov's gun thing. You don't put a pool of mimosa on the side of the ring unless you intend to use it, either in the finish of the match or after the match to humiliate either the heel or the babyface. And probably in this case, more likely, the babyface humiliating the heel. Get his heat back. Before coming out for the match, Jericho cut a pretty decent promo talking about Orange Cassidy, their history, their previous matches, and how this whole thing was an experiment to see if he could make Orange Cassidy a main eventer, and now he is. I really wouldn't go that far to say that Orange Cassidy is a main eventer. Like, I don't see him challenging or holding the world title. I don't even know if I'd see him challenging and holding the TNT title at this point. But I see him being one of those ones that in AEW has some name recognition, and you could put him at a decent part on the card, and with the right opponent could have a pretty good match, especially if he's serious, as we see Orange get serious at times, not the just hands in pockets and then the foot kick. Him actually being full-on serious, like, you just angered me type serious. So in that regard, Jericho's right, showing that you can get a good match out of this man. Of course, once the bell rings, Jericho goes for the codebreaker, goes for the pin. 1-2 kick out. Even though codebreaker is a finish this early in the match, I don't mind a kick out of it. You could say that Orange still has enough energy left to kick out of a move like that. And plus, would you really want Jericho to get the win that quickly? It's one of those things, like, you got to pick your battles. I mean, they could have done the whole roll out of the ring, but if there's no rope breaks, I don't know how well that would work. Plus, you could roll into the Mimosa by mistake. Jericho takes control. And at one point, he puts Orange through one of the side tables by the Mimosa. Orange's head hits some of the bubbly containers. And then he goes for a bat. But Orange counters this bat shot with a super kick and then hits Jericho with one of the buckets holding the bubbly. Turns out fair play, batter. Once they get back in the ring, at one point Jericho takes control again and he puts Orange in the walls of Jericho. Now the way Orange gets out of this I thought was clever because it's like, they mentioned no rope breaks. So how are they going to do? The thing about Mimosa I mentioned, this is the first time it comes to play. Orange crawls to the ropes, which is by the Mimosa. He gets this one containing thing, puts some of it in it. Jericho pulls him back away, then Orange twists in a way to where Jericho is partially facing him, and he throws some of it in Jericho's face, forcing him to break the hold. It's gimmicky, but it's playing into the gimmick of the match, and it's a creative way to break the hold. Now, to that end, this match, like the opener, is very gimmick-oriented, but there's enough seriousness in it to where you believe that these two men want to get the win over the other, and it's not just a bunch of silliness for the sake of being silly. The only thing I can really compare it to is like the Stone Cold and Booker T fight in the store, to where the whole thing is silly and it's all based around the fact of fighting in a store. But there's enough seriousness in it to where you believe these men want to beat the crap out of each other. They're just using what's at hand for entertainment. You know, like the whole Booker got milk. Same principle. Enraged Orange makes an appearance a little bit after this, and he takes it to Jericho, doing a spinning DDT for a near fall. And things go. Jericho's on the ropes at one point, and Orange does a double Orange punch, and the second one knocks Jericho off the ropes into the Mimosa, and Orange Cassidy wins the rubber match. Now, the way they do this speaks two things to me. One, Jericho doesn't have to be pinned by him, so he eats the loss without having to be pinned, which is a little old school, with some of the old school wrestlers would eat a loss another way. Plus, gives Jericho enough stuff to complain about, even though this stipulation was his idea. We all know how Jericho is as a heel. He can complain about it. Even if the feud doesn't continue, he'll probably complain about it and then try to brush it under the rug. And it also plays into what I mentioned earlier about Chekhov's gun. You don't hold the thing of Mimosa around unless you're going to use it. And he humiliates the heel. So a nice little finish to this match. And for what the gimmick is, it's a match you would expect from these two individuals. So it was a pretty good match and a nice little segue from the World Tag Team title match into the World title match proper. MJF, Maxwell Jacob Friedman, one of my favorite heels in wrestling right now, and the wielder of the Dynamite Diamond Ring, challenging Jon Moxley in a 60-minute time limit match where the paradigm shift is banned. And if Moxley uses it, he is disqualified and the title goes to Jacob. They begin the match with chain wrestling. Mox takes control once they go to the inside, which is kind of how the back and forth of this match goes. Mox takes control when they're outside. Jacob takes control for a little bit once they go inside. So it's a nice little way to show their styles, where Maxwell is a more traditional wrestler and Moxley is more of the hardcore brawler type wrestler, where the outside is his old friend. MJF does retake control inside. And as they're going back and forth, one thing that Jim Ross said on commentary did strike me, and I'm like, yeah, he's kind of right, especially with how well MJF is taken to being a natural heel. And that is, once a generation you hear about a prodigy, he's the prodigy. Yeah, I would say that does fit MJF. He does seem to be the guy that stands out as a natural throughout this, and he even compares him to Dustin Rhodes at one point, that Dustin was a natural. I mean, that's why his nickname was the Natural. Because he didn't get to where he was just because he was the son of the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, baby. He got that because he was the Natural. Those genetics did pass along to him, if you will. The pair end up on the outside once again, and it is during this exchange that MJF's head is shoved against the ring post and he is busted open. It's an obvious play job with how it's filmed, but it's excellent, and he's bleeding throughout the rest of the match. I mean, at one point later, there's a shot where you can really see the blood coming out. Like, this makes this. This shows that Moxley's in his element. MJF has entered his cage, and he is paying for it. He's paying for his insolence for the whole MJF 2020 thing and all the promos leading to it. He's paying for it literally with his own blood as it's dripping down his forehead. And Mox does a tilt-a-whirl slam on the outside to MJF a little bit after this. Then we get a pile driver for a near fall. You know, another little thing with a pile driver doesn't get the finish. But with how this match is building, it does show a little bit of toughness on MJF's side. And then a little bit after this, Moxley bites MJF's forehead, which then, of course, they got the whole blood thing there, which some people say that's not really sanitary. You wouldn't see them do that in WWE, but Moxley does not care about some rules, yeah. He really doesn't care about safe conduct, and it strikes me that his character would do something like this. Now, Ambrose near the end of his last WWE run would not, with the whole gas mask thing. But the whole nature of Moxley as a brawler, I can see him biting. A little bit after this, we get a paradigm shift tease, which Moxley holds it because he's like, yeah, I can't really do it. Nah, he's just so used from transitioning there that it plays in the match. And MJF makes him pay for it because he twists this into an armbar and he's holding it in a way like, is Moxley going to tap? Is Moxley going to tap? No, Moxley gets a rope break, but he is now favoring that arm a little bit. And he favors that arm for a lot of the match after this, and they even bring it up on commentary. MJF does a heat seeker for a 2 count, which Mox, a little bit after this, does an air raid crash for a 2 count as well, so trading 2 counts back and forth. Like I mentioned, Mox is still favoring the arm, which they do bring up on commentary. Of course, MJF does the traditional heel ref spot where he pulls the ref in front of him to avoid an attack. And then as he's sidestepping the ref, he does the old thud to the eye, which I really do miss. It's one of those things that you don't really see a lot of heels do anymore. I mean, I don't really expect a big old bastard heel like, say, a Brock Lesnar to do it unless he's facing someone that's even bigger than him. But I'd say, like, a more average-sized heel, like, doing the whole Ric Flair thing, like, The Miz should be doing the occasional eye thud. It's good for MJF. It should be good enough for The Miz. And then he turns this into a pin attempt, which Moxley kicks out of. Once Mox gets back on a vertical base, he gets a sleeper hold locked in, which, of course, being the dastardly heel he is, MJF low blows Moxley, something Moxley probably would do in a similar situation, even though he's a face, and then rolls up for another 2 count. So they are going back and forth a lot during this time, but neither is able to get a good enough advantage for the pin. And this is where Wardlow comes into play. He's been watching the whole match on the outside. You know he's going to come into play at one point, as he usually does in a lot of MJF's pay-per-view matches. And like always, he tosses the Dynamite Diamond ring to MJF while distracting the ref. And I love the way this is filmed and the way it came off on TV. MJF gets the Dynamite Diamond ring like he's going to go put it up. He looks up, he sees Moxley looking at him. And for a brief moment, MJF is like, no, no, no. Moxley, behind the referee's back, gets him, does the paradigm shift. Ref didn't see it. He didn't do it. And then when the ref finally turns around for the pin, he wins. They do address it on commentaries, like if a ref hadn't had his back turned, he'd be disqualified. And Moxley is still the AEW World Champion. And we go off the air following Mox looking at Archer and Jake the Snake Roberts and him giving them the 1-finger salute. Perfect way to end this pay-per-view, which, as you can tell from my breakdown of the matches, I did enjoy for the most part. I mean, there were a couple moments here and there. That one match probably should have ended before it ended. But overall, I was pleased with it. I obviously didn't watch the buy-in, so I can't really comment on those matches, only from Baker's match onward. And it does make me look forward to what's going to happen on Dynamite this week. And of course, it makes me wonder, is MJF's feud with Moxley going to be one and done? Or are we going to see a rematch considering that he technically did break the stipulation? Because based on how MJF was doing his promos, he'll probably lodge a formal complaint and say he's entitled to a rematch since Moxley did go back on his word, even if the referee didn't see him. But like I said, ref didn't see it, he didn't do it.